welcome to your new obsession, where every episode is packed with tools and science to help you become the best version of yourself. Whether you're a biohacking newbie or a seasoned pro, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome back to the Biohacking Trainer Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Czaplewski, longevity enthusiast, personal trainer, and fellow biohacker. Today, we're diving into a topic that has absolutely exploded in the fitness and biohacking world over the past few years. And what that is understanding what is your HRV, your resting heart rate, and recovery scores. Now, if you're like myself and you wear devices like the Whoop, Oura Ring, an Apple Watch, Garmin, Fitbit, or pretty much any modern day fitness tracker, you've probably seen these metrics pop up every single day. If you're anything like me, you wake up, you check your app, and suddenly it tells you either you're recovered, you're strained, your HRV has dropped, and you need to take it easy today. But what do these numbers actually truly mean? Should you trust them as well? And how do you use them without becoming obsessed with your wearable? Because honestly, I think a lot of people either ignore these metrics completely, or they tend to become completely controlled by them. And they base every single thing that they do that day solely off of the metrics from their wearable. So in today's episode, we're going to break down essentially what is HRV, what your resting heart rate says about your body, how your recovery scores actually work, how does sleep, stress, training, alcohol, travel, and even relationships affect these numbers. And most importantly, how do you use this information in real life aspects to improve your overall performance and health without becoming neurotic about it? So whether you're an athlete, someone trying to improve longevity, or just somebody who wants more energy and better recovery, this episode is certainly for you. So let's dive into it, shall we? So first area I want to start with is what exactly is HRV? HRV essentially is your heart rate variability. Now that may sound a bit complicated, but the concept of HRV is relatively simple. So a lot of people think that your heart beats like a metronome. So beat, 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 perfectly even. But in true reality, healthy hearts are not perfectly rhythmic. There's actually variation in time between heartbeats. So for example, one might happen at 0.9 seconds after the previous beat. Then the next one will take place 1.1 seconds later. That fluctuation right there is essentially your HRV, your heart rate variability number. And surprisingly, more variability is actually a very good thing. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are scratching your head and saying, why is that? Shouldn't it be perfect? Shouldn't it be the same amount of time in between each heartbeat? Not necessarily, because heart rate variability reflects the balance of your autonomic nervous system. And just to touch quickly on your autonomic nervous system, you have two branches to the ANS, or autonomic nervous system. You have your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight. And then you have your parasympathetic system, which is more of that rest and digest portion. Now, when your body is stressed, or you've overtrained, you're sleep deprived because you're having to catch up on different projects at work, you're feeling sick, or you're dehydrated, you're anxious, or you're feeling inflamed, that's when your sympathetic nervous system tends to dominate. And you're in more of that constant state of fight or flight. And typically when that happens, your HRV numbers will go down. But when your body is recovered, it's feeling resilient, you feel calm, it's adaptable, and you're feeling overall healthy, you're in more of that parasympathetic nervous system, or that nervous system state, which is going to become more active. So essentially, when you want to kind of get down to the nitty gritty of it all, HRV is basically essentially looking at stress and your recovery markers. One thing I really want people to understand is HRV is highly individual. So you should not compare your HRV to someone next to you or someone that's online. You'll see some people that may post that their HRV is at 120. Someone might post that it's at 40. Another person over here might post that it's at 180. None of that truly matters unless you know what your true baseline is. I know there's some data points that will state that if you have an HRV above 60, you're relatively healthy. HRV below 50, your body's in a constant state of fight or flight and you're getting sick, or you may be dealing with an autoimmune disease. Now, there's not a lot of literature that truly backs that, but again, you want to focus on what is your baseline. Some healthy people will naturally run a lower HRV around, say, 50 to 60. Some will naturally run higher. What matters truly the most is what are your trends, your consistency, and how you feel alongside your data. So if I go to sleep one night and I wear a Whoop and I wake up the next morning and I feel great, I feel well rested, I feel like I'm full of energy, and my recovery scores are good, but my HRV number is only at 60 or it's at 55, then that's probably a good number for me if that's consistently the number that I see when I feel good. There's ways that you can train it and improve it, but try to stick to what is your baseline in regards to what makes you feel optimal. Now, another example I always like to bring to the forefront when it comes to HRV. So if your normal HRV is around 70, and suddenly one day it drops down to 35 for several days, your body is probably under stress, and the stress could be coming from several different areas. Now, when people think of stress, they always tend to run directly to mental stressors, whether that's work, relationship, etc. But stress could be coming from a lot of different places. It could be coming from poor sleep quality. You're getting less than 6 hours of sleep. Some cases, I know some people who think they truly do thrive off of only 3 hours of sleep, but at the same time, they're combating that with a copious amount of caffeine. Now, another indicator, sometimes stress could be coming from alcohol consumption. Stress can also be coming from some hard bouts of training. It can also come from emotional stressors. If you're having issues within a relationship, a family member's passed, or even your dog or cat has recently passed, that's an emotional stressor, and that can create some discrepancies with HRV numbers, and your body's going to react the same way no matter what. Another one's travel. Travel can cause some stress on your body. Illness, of course, undereating, overeating, or dehydration can. This is where wearables can be incredibly, incredibly useful, is just being able to see the trends. Now, you don't need to necessarily make and break every decision from the day directly gearing towards your wearable, but it can give you some insights as to what's causing more stress on your body, whether it's drinking alcohol or a heavy week of travel, or if you have been having some very tough bouts of workouts throughout the week. That can give you a good indicator of where you need to dial it back slightly or where you need to add more adaptation. I know in my own case, when it comes to my personal HRV numbers, I've seen my HRV numbers tank drastically after having 1 to 2 drinks a night out. I've seen where my recovery scores were below normal, and if you wear a Whoop, it was about 5% once, and my HRV numbers were in the 30s or 20s when I tend to run above 60, usually around 65 for my HRV score. I've even seen on travel days my HRV number tank down as well, and I've also seen, of course, from bad nights of sleep, but also days where I felt more irritable than normal, whether that was from stresses at home, being a father to a little 3-year-old that wants to say no and wants to be always right and just wants to argue a little bit. All those can have a role in regards to your HRV numbers, and that's what I've seen in my own personal cases. My HRV numbers have drastically tanked. Now, on the flip side of things, where I've seen HRV numbers drastically increase or improve, came from simply doing, say, better cardiovascular fitness activities, better stress management, having better sleep quality, so getting, between 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and recovery capacity, whether that was adding some wellness modalities like compression, red light, cryotherapy, even hyperbarics, and etc. And creating better nervous system resilience can help improve your HRV numbers, which all this is incredible because we often think that health is just how do I look, how much do I weigh, how much can I lift? But truly, your nervous system does matter tremendously too. So we touched a little bit about HRV. Now let's talk a bit more about, say, your resting heart rate. This segment's a bit more straightforward. Your resting heart rate is simply just how many times your heart beats per minute while at complete rest. For most adults, a normal resting heart rate is somewhere between 60 to 100 beats per minute. But generally speaking, lower tends to be better to a point. Now, highly trained endurance athletes may have a resting heart rate in the 40s or even sometimes in the 30s. Now, why is that? That's typically because their heart becomes much more efficient. Their heart pumps more blood per beat, so it doesn't need to work as hard. Now, as opposed to somebody who has a resting heart rate that low but doesn't train, then that's more of an indicator of bradycardia, right? Now, just like HRV, your resting heart rate can tell you a lot about recovery and stress. Typically, higher resting heart rate, more stress on the body, lower resting heart rate, better recovery, and much better cardiovascular efficiency. Now, again, trends matter more than single readings. So if your resting heart rate suddenly jumps 5 or 10 or even 15 beats above normal, that can be a sign of several different things, from illness, poor recovery, overtraining, higher stress levels, being a bit dehydrated, poor sleep scores, and too much alcohol consumption. Now, a lot of people actually notice elevated resting heart rate before they get sick. So I've noticed in my own cases where my wearable will tell me I had a poor recovery. My HRV was a little lower, but my resting heart rate had jumped about 15 points. In that case, then I can have a good understanding that potentially I might be getting sick. I might be coming down with something, especially if personally I'm feeling a bit more lethargic or I do feel a bit sick or a bit down. You got to think of it as your body is essentially already mounting an immune response. And I've seen clients even tell me that their wearables said that their recovery scores were terrible, and then 2 days later, they were sick. One thing I love about resting heart rate is just how easy it is to simply understand it. If over time you improve your fitness, you lose excess body fat, you have better sleep, you can manage your stress a little better, and you can improve cardiovascular conditioning, you'll often see resting heart rate gradually improve as well. That's one reason cardio is so important for longevity purposes, not just for the aesthetics or for performance base, but for heart efficiency and for heart function. Your heart literally becomes better at its job. And another huge point, people often underestimate emotional stress. Emotional stress affects your body physiologically, just like everything else, whether it's work stress, financial stress, relationship stress. Your body can't tell the difference between different types of stressors, so it's going to react the same way to each type of stress. So if you are having more emotional stress from, say, a financial situation, your body's going to react the same way to that stress as it would to, say, a physical illness. Or if you were to be hit by a ball and you had a significant injury, your body's going to react the same way and push you into more of a fight or flight response and take you out of that parasympathetic system. Now let's touch a bit on recovery scores here. So this is where a lot of devices combine multiple data points into one simplified score, and different companies calculate these differently. So most recovery scores will include things like your HRV, your resting heart rate, your sleep quality, your sleep duration, your respiratory rate, even body temperature, training strain, and movement patterns. So basically, recovery scores attempt to answer how prepared your body is for the day. And me personally, I actually think this is where wearable tech becomes really useful if you do use it correctly. Now, the key is use recovery scores as guidance, not gospel. So it's not the end all be all if it says your recovery score is optimal or if it's poor. For instance, you may have a day where you're only 40% recovered according to your wearable, but you feel amazing, or vice versa. So sometimes your wearable can say you're recovered or not, but your body feels terrible. Always make sure you combine objective data with subjective awareness. Now, what does that mean? That means asking yourself every morning, how do you actually feel? And this is important because biohacking should improve body awareness and not just replace it with technology. I think some people do tend to outsource all the decision making to technology. I get it. We all live in a very fast-paced society and it's very busy, but still having that personalized approach means the world to everything. And if you tend to create all that decision making to technology, that becomes very unhealthy. Now, that being said, recovery scores can help tremendously, right? With preventing overtraining, optimizing workout intensity, intensifying sleep issues, or understanding recovery patterns. Now, another example here is if your recovery score is consistently low after late night eating, you can learn something. If you're trying new modalities and you tried hyperbarics for 20 sessions straight, and you've seen all of your numbers jump like recovery and HRV and resting heart rates, you learn something there. That means hyperbaric treatments are good for you. Now, if you've been doing cold plunging every single morning for a month straight and your numbers have not changed, doesn't mean it's great for you, doesn't mean it's bad for you, it's just neutral. It doesn't cause any major adaptation for you or any change to your recovery scores. These metrics here can create good feedback loops, and these feedback loops are going to create good awareness. In my own case, personally, when I use my wearable device and I try different things, I use it to help perfect my sleep with what time is optimal for me in regards to going to sleep and what time is optimal for me to try to wake up to get whatever I need to get done for the day, and how soon should I have my dinner or how late, and what modality works best to help me get to sleep, or what helps get me up and get me moving to have a very productive day, or what modality helps with my recovery numbers. These trends are going to just continue to help move the needle, so to speak, in the right direction over time. And remember, health is not built in one night. It's built through repetitive behaviors. Now, some practical tips here. How do you actually use all this information? So first thing first, track consistently. Your wearable is most useful when it gathers long-term trends. One random HRV reading means almost nothing to you. 3 months of data, now that's great. Secondly, pay attention to behaviors that influence your metrics. Ask yourself, what improves my recovery? What destroys my recovery? How does alcohol affect me? How does late night eating affect me? How does stress show up in my data as well? And where is most of my stress coming from? Because the truth is, your body does keep the score. And wearables simply help reveal the patterns. Now, third, don't overreact. This is huge. So one bad recovery day does not mean that you need to skip all activity, you need to panic, or cancel life. Sometimes lighter movement actually helps with recovery. Maybe instead of crushing a max effort workout, you go for a walk, you go and stretch, maybe you go just do some mobility work, or you do some zone 2 cardio training, or even go do some yoga classes. Recovery doesn't always mean that doing nothing is good. Sometimes you need to have an active recovery day. Now, my fourth point here, you want to focus on the basics before fancy biohacks. So everybody wants to do cold plunging, everybody wants to do the red light treatments, everybody wants to try some different supplements, everybody wants to utilize the expensive gadgets. But honestly, the biggest recovery boosters are still sleep, nutrition, hydration, stress management, exercise, and consistency. The basics still win. And lastly, don't become emotionally attached to all the numbers. You are not your HRV score. You are not your recovery score. Technology should empower you, not create anxiety. Because ironically, stressing over recovery metrics can lower recovery. So to recap today's episode, HRV helps us understand nervous system balance and stress resilience. Resting heart rate gives insights into cardiovascular efficiency and recovery. And recovery scores combine multiple metrics that are all different depending on the manufacturer that are going to help guide training and lifestyle decisions. But the biggest takeaway to all of this is these tools are meant to increase awareness. They help us essentially identify patterns, improve recovery, and train smarter, and ultimately improve long-term health and longevity. But they should complement body awareness, not replace it. Your body's still the ultimate source of feedback. And I want to thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Biohacking Trainer Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend, leave a review, and follow the podcast for future episodes on fitness, recovery, longevity, wellness, and biohacking. You can also connect with me on Instagram and social media for more content, tips, and behind-the-scenes updates. And as always, stay healthy, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next time.